I truly do not understand the negativity towards the game. The hardest part of a game developer's job is its community, and some of these players are either delusional or just entitled. The demands and expectations I'm seeing on just this subreddit alone are disturbing. People don't want to play games to have fun anymore. They just want to point out all the flaws and mistakes. What fucking Starfield planet do you come from? Microsoft is a $2.4 trillion corporation. The marketing behind this game was so insane that it got you to buy an Xbox Series X to play it. This game should be held to the absolute highest standard.
You got time for a quick chat? I'd appreciate it when you're able.
I think it's safe to say most would consider this a fair comparison, but I've seen entire articles saying otherwise. And I've also seen comments in my own little corner of the internet, and I can't help but feel like I've lost some years off my life having read them. The defense I hear most of the time for Starfield is that it can't be compared to X game. I agree that maybe some games should not be compared. We maybe shouldn't compare the experience of a platformer like Mario with our experience with Grand Theft Auto. Most genres are far different experiences from one another, and obviously I fully understand this. But to that, I could ask, why do we play games to begin with? To have fun, right? So to some degree, we can compare any game to one another if we're strictly talking about how much enjoyment or how much fun we had. But when we're talking about games that share core narrative mechanics, games that are expected to have somewhat the same level of overall polish, and games that are basically just subgenres of the RPG, I think it's safe to say that we can absolutely compare them to one another. I don't even see in what world we are not allowed to compare a game like Baldur's Gate 3 to Starfield. When people use this defense, what are you saying anyway? Are you trying to tell me that because Starfield can't be compared to Baldur's Gate 3 that it is now somehow great? What kind of defense is this? What game compared to Starfield justifies core issues? What open world game have you ever played where there wasn't local maps made? I only played 25 to 30 hours of Starfield. If it wasn't for the community mods making all the quality of life mods, I would have been done with the game after 10 hours at best.
Now, everyone says that the game gets good after 12 hours. I am just shy of that 12-hour mark, and I gotta be honest with you, sports fans, I can't envision a world where I hit that 12-hour mark and a switch flips on, and all of a sudden, it's exhilarating. It blows my hair back, and it's a masterpiece. Like, I don't see that happening. But let's just assume that we are in a fantasy dimension where that is the case. That still doesn't excuse the first 12 hours being miserably paced and excruciatingly uninteresting. Like, that is still a bad design, if you have to invest 12 hours before the game actually gets good. So, I don't know if that claim is just cope or if that really is true, but even still, it doesn't negate my feelings on how this first just under 12 hours experience has been going. You shouldn't have to put that much time into a game before it makes it worth it.
But even modders are starting to come forward and are just saying the game is rotten to the core. It has so many core issues, even compared to something like Skyrim, and that is kind of impressive in itself, if you ask me. And to top it all off, Bethesda is going to try and charge for them now. The whole scene is just going to die. It will be Skyrim that continues to keep Bethesda's modding community alive.
This is a Skyrim fight? Wait, what the Wait, why is this so good? So Todd's getting paid for this, right? I think that's the most impressive thing about all of this. Is to manage the fact that he's managed to get paid for people effectively making a completely new game. Jesus. That is really cool. If the entire game was like this, I probably would play it. God damn.
But I sense an uprising with the paid mods, if I'm being honest. This isn't the first time Bethesda has tried to pull this shit. It was pulled down within weeks because of the backlash the first time. I guess they just don't learn their lesson. We're going to start making some comparisons now, and I'll also explain why these are fair comparisons, even though it might just be obvious to most of you anyway. Are they vastly different games? Of course. But they still share one very important component: role-playing. I don't care if you're shooting guns in an open world.
Bro, it just keeps going. Hey, yo, boys, keep this in mind. Remember that Starfield video where the guy went in with the pistol? Yeah, compare it to this. It does become good after 50 hours.
Point and clicking everything you see or whatever. If it's a role-playing game, at its core, they're supposed to be very similar. And Bethesda bragged about all their dialogue options in Starfield on a few occasions. I can't really blame people for saying that they're not the same genre, because I don't even know what Bethesda made, honestly. Luke Stevens made the analogy of Starfield feeling more like fish bowls.
But it won't matter since they aren't contiguous. Each of these individual tiles are generated with the planet's seed and then an individual seed based on where you plan on landing, whether it's next to a coast, in a mountainous area, or a crater area, a desert, or a forest. These are not planets to explore. They're individual microbiomes that are based on a parent seed. It's like generating a tiny map in Minecraft every time you land your ship, and that might not be a big deal to you, but as far as I'm concerned, this is a far cry from the free exploration of a planet that was promised to us.
The masterminds that gave you Oblivion, Fallout, and Skyrim, and Skyrim, and Skyrim, comes an epic, almost a decade in the making, that takes and innovates the Bethesda formula by doing the exact same thing they always do, but in space. Starfield.
According to Bethesda Game Studios themselves, the development of Starfield began back in 2015. Yeah, 2015. That's an 8-year development cycle. We can't say for sure of the budget, but there is credible sources that estimate it was something like $400 million. But that's including the marketing as well. Although this game didn't start active development until 2015, the concept was put into place since 2011. It's estimated that Bethesda had nearly 500 people working on Starfield actively for 7 of those years. It's worth noting, Starfield was delayed 4 times if my count is right. It also seems like a lot was cut from the game if we're going off of the early leaks. Leaks suggested that the game was initially more complex and hardcore, with mechanics such as fuel consumption and interstellar trade, which were discarded before launch. Which is fine, it's good to keep scope in check, but it seems like they may have cut out some of the mechanics that would appeal to a lot of space travel fans. Development for Baldur's Gate 3 started back in 2017, although their approach was vastly different as it went into early access all the way back in October of 2020. Say what you will about this approach, but it actually kind of boils my blood when people say that Baldur's Gate 3 didn't deserve Game of the Year because it released back in 2020. I guess some folks just don't understand how early access games work. I played Hades in early access, and it was extremely polished even then, but I would have never considered that any kind of release. From what I understand, you couldn't even play more than the first act anyway in early access of Baldur's Gate 3. According to a few articles, Baldur's Gate 3 was developed by over 300 staff across 6 studios, with a budget surpassing $100 million. This figure is generally lower than the budget for many other AAA titles, which often involve larger teams and more substantial financial outlays. It's also worth mentioning Larian said they almost faced bankruptcy a couple times. Even though they don't suggest following in their exact footsteps to get a game out, there is still a lesson to be learned from them one way or another. But luckily, a great reputation in this industry goes a long way, so I don't see Larian facing as many financial issues in the future after making such a successful game like Baldur's Gate 3.
You're a fucking idiot.
Let's end this.
As you can see,
Hi there. Welcome to Terrible. How can I help you?
Oh, he's floating.
This is kind of a slippery slope. What seemed like a marketing strategy to me, the discussion around this game at launch was how it was Bethesda's least buggy game so far, which might be true, but I'm not so sure. And if we take a step back, since when is this a selling point of a game? Because I swear to God Bethesda was paying people to say this, but that's maybe a little tinfoil hat theory. But it's what all the critics were saying before actual users got their hands on the game. It was just weird. Even I began to think that maybe this was some kind of return to form for Bethesda, even though every game of theirs that I've played has been pretty buggy.
I read on the internet that our games have had a few bugs.
All of this just works.
It's not, I'm not kidding.
So I don't know if you can call it that. Maybe it's just turning a new leaf with the Microsoft acquisition, I thought. Not to go too far off topic, but I think it was a miracle for Bethesda that they were bought by Microsoft. Because if they had to further develop the game for more than just PC and Xbox, the game would have been far less optimized for everybody. Anyway, it just seemed like all the early reviews were saying that they had played all the way through this game without any major bugs. This was not the case for me, even within the first 20 or 30 minutes, and a lot of other people. My PC isn't the newest PC out there, but it's far from the oldest or the worst. I tend to upgrade my graphics card every 2 to 3 years depending on the leap in performance from one generation to the other, and overhaul the rest of the PC parts every 5 years at the max, or if my platform just dies. But when Todd Howard had the audacity to tell me I should upgrade my PC, when I just did a full upgrade less than 2 years ago, I don't know what to say to that.
Why did you not optimize this game for PC?
We did. It's running great. It is a next-gen PC game. Upgrade your PC.
And honestly, what in Starfield justifies needing all of us to upgrade? What groundbreaking new tech is in this game?
That's weird. Like, what the hell?
You couldn't even be bothered to give us an FOV slider in DLSS. But thanks to the awesome community making your games playable and better most of the time, I was able to get access to features that every other game manages to have at launch. And just remember, they had 8 years to get it right and not be missing core features, even though they're more like core components to a working game. Normally, any other game, I can easily push 1440p 60 frames per second without breaking a sweat. But it didn't matter what setting I changed in Starfield. No matter what, it was the same. So if someone can explain or justify to me the poor optimization in this game, I'm all ears. Because I have yet to find anything that justifies it running this poorly. And then you have Xbox users saying, oh, it runs fine on my platform. But if you consider a locked 30 frames per second most of the time great performance in this generation, that just isn't true. Most games come out with a performance mode that have 60 frames per second, and I don't see anything in Starfield that justifies not having this mode. And I won't lie to you, I can somewhat be a performance snob when it comes to PC gaming a lot of the time. I don't give a lot of games a pass anymore if their game isn't well optimized. The more we let companies get away with buggy and broken releases, the more it's going to happen. So whether you're a big or small developer, you should always keep your scope in check. That's not to say that I expect perfection either. I'm usually happy if I can hit a consistent frame rate most of the time. Enter Cyberpunk. Maybe one of the most recent examples of this. This game was highly anticipated due to its promises and features, and the reputation of the developer, CD Projekt Red. The hype surrounding the game was out of control, with gamer dum-dum brains worldwide eagerly awaiting its release. However, when the game was finally released, you guessed it, the game failed to live up to the high expectations set by the hype. This led to widespread disappointment and well-deserved criticism. Have you ever heard of another game that was just flat out removed from digital storefronts? I don't think I ever have. But don't worry, they fixed this one hastily in just 3 years' time. I mean, to its defense, it is pretty awesome now. Everyone has recently given Cyberpunk a huge pat on the back with their 2.0 release, but I still have a hard time doing so. Jakey breaks this down perfectly, and I do echo this.
People in the comments will once again applaud and defend companies like EA or CD Projekt Red for sticking with their game and fixing it long after release, which it's like, I guess that deserves some level of praise, maybe? You know what I mean? It's like you buy a taco for the full price because you were advertised a full taco on the fucking taco screen. And when you get that taco, you open up the greasy paper just to see a busted ass half taco shell with only beans on it. Only beans. Oops, all beans. And then 6 months later, a Taco Bell employee rings your doorbell and gives you the other half of that busted taco that still doesn't have all the meat on it that they promised. And your response is to start clapping? Like, what the fuck? And don't get me wrong, definitely throw love to the hardworking individual devs that actually got in the crunchy taco shell trenches and coded this broken mess back together. But give zero fucking credit to the shitty overlord Taco Bell EA Corporation responsible for that broken taco that you paid full price for in the first place. God damn it, I need a taco or at least a churro to the throat.
I have a really hard time giving CD Projekt Red a huge pat on the back when they finally gave us the meat of the taco 2 years later. However, they deserve credit for actually turning the game around. There is no denying that. It was a huge project, and at least it had creative direction that gave us some kind of empathy for CDPR. This was only strike one. The same can't be said for Bethesda though. And I don't think CDPR will make another Cyberpunk 2077 fumble like that. I already mentioned in a previous video that some of the Starfield devs were going into Steam reviews and gaslighting their own community, essentially telling them that they are playing the game wrong and we should appreciate how hard they worked on this game.
So how talented can they be if a random modder can solve a problem that takes the team months? How talented can they really be? Do you think that the people that are working on at what point is there any actual mistake that anyone can have any accountability for? Have you ever thought that having a corporate structure that's so large with so much levels of iteration that nobody can ever be at fault for anything is a very bad way to design things? Because if you have it that way, you can never assign blame and fix problems because you don't know where they come from. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the problem is that everything is such a granular thing that people are responsible for eyebrows on every character that nobody's actually ever responsible for why Sarah in the game looks like a bad version of AI. And the personality is an even worse version of AI. I don't care about how talented they are or not. You've engineered a situation that creates failure. That's the truth.
Since when am I, as a customer, supposed to give a shit about the hard work that goes into the games that I buy? I bet there were a ton of people working really hard on a lot of bad games, but that doesn't mean that we should support them. Redfall was terrible, but I'm sure there is tons of hardworking people at that studio. Does that mean we should just not review the game negatively because we feel bad?
Ooh. Redfall is $69. Oh shit, you can buy the $100 edition. Oh wow.
I don't see any other devs trying to change people's minds. It's just a weird approach. We're the ones trading money for a game. We work hard for our money. It's not my job to pat you on the back for trying. It's not your job to just make me see it your way. And that's not to say that those empty planets were empty because of some creative choice one way or another. This was just a desperate attempt by Bethesda to make people change their reviews. I do kinda get it. It's a bad look when your last controversial release is sitting at higher reviews than your new shiny game. I guess Fallout 76 has come a long way, but the damage has been done to me and a lot of people, so it's too little too late. And I think a lot of companies need to just start considering that first impressions last forever for a lot of people. Maybe I would have gone a little easier on Starfield if Fallout 76 wasn't such a nightmare. Who knows, but it just seems like Bethesda is always followed in some kind of controversy. And maybe absolute polish is a bit dramatic. Act 3 can be a bit rough, and some other populated areas around the game, especially when the game first launched. I was very thankful that I do have a somewhat newer PC, so the performance was noticeably worse in Act 3 than the rest of the game, but it's not like I considered upgrading my PC. I was running Baldur's Gate 3 on my backup PC with far less powerful hardware and having a blast. And I spent 3 times more time in Act 1 of Baldur's Gate 3 than I did the entirety of Starfield. So for me personally, by the time I made it to Act 3, I was literally hundreds of hours into the game. Were some of those hours simply just stopping and smelling the roses? Of course, but who doesn't do that in a game that they love? That's all a part of the experience. There were other bugs in Act 3, especially in certain battles. There was one specifically where one of the enemies would lock themselves into a corner of the arena and they just would run into the wall until I restarted the game. Luckily, there are so many ways to beat a fight in Baldur's Gate 3, it just made me have to think of a different method to complete it. And I'm not trying to justify bugs in any game, but it was far more acceptable considering what this game has to offer compared to a lot of games. And having my own bug fix, essentially, just inspired me to play the game in a way that I normally wouldn't, so there's kind of a silver lining there, I guess. This problem happened in a couple different battles, and I don't have the footage for it because I didn't even have a YouTube channel then, but it is what it is. There's another problem in Baldur's Gate 3 that I think was just solved with the latest hotfix, but I'm not sure. But your party members have a tendency to not follow you around in certain scenarios, like jumping off of a cliff or something like that. But I think it's been addressed at this point. With it just recently being addressed, I'm sure a lot of players have experienced this, so it's just important to point these things out for fair comparison's sake. This was easily the most frustrating bug of the whole game. I don't know if you'll call it a bug. It wasn't so much of a problem that I even bothered looking into it though. But like I said in one of my previous videos, it's really hard for me to put Baldur's Gate 3 in the same boat as any other game with similar performance issues when it was so perfectly optimized in the first 2 acts, which I would consider more than a game in themselves. I played Baldur's Gate 3 close to its official launch. By the time I made it to Act 3, there were already patches and hotfixes for better performance, so I honestly didn't even see the worst of it. I imagine I'm not alone in this, because with as much time as I put into it, I was still progressing faster than a lot of people. And that's just another point is this game's replayability. After all this time and multiple playthroughs, Baldur's Gate 3 just keeps giving back. It's especially weird for someone like me that doesn't normally continue to play games after credits roll. And here I am hundreds of hours later on my 3rd playthrough. There has been very few games in the past 10 years that I can say I play on a regular basis, or can say that they had tremendous impact on me at all. Clearly, I'm not the only one if we're going off of just Steam charts alone. Even though I'm part of this statistic, I can't help but be blown away that so many other people can see just how amazing this game really is. Baldur's Gate 3 isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and it will certainly be a game that we talk about and play for many years to come. I decided months ago that it's my new favorite game of all time, and I think at least for a lot of people, it's at least one of the greatest RPGs of all time, period. My time with Starfield was brief, but in that short time, I was able to read between the lines, if you will, on most of the narrative choices.
I'm going to groan on behalf of scientists everywhere. Then you're going to hand over the artifact. Oh my heckin' Reddit science gods!
Bethesda bragged about the narrative scope of this game, but most of the responses and choices just seemed so out of touch, and ultimately led to the same conclusion no matter what you chose. For me, this is one of the biggest reasons Starfield lacks any kind of replayability. I'd be lying to you if I said I had absolutely zero fun with Starfield. At its core, it did have some potential, but all of that is nullified by immersion-breaking NPCs that all seem to be essential. And, unfortunately, kinda brain-dead.
The characters' facial expressions and lip syncing, which are done procedurally by a program, are incredibly accurate, and the character models look really great under the correct lighting.
It might sound stupid, but sometimes we just want to kill everything in a video game to test its real limits, to see what we as the player can get away with.
I'm going to be doing big mean guy playthrough. I'm going to be intergalactic douchebag, so we're going full renegade. We'll see how she goes. If Grandma comes into my system trying to bring me a sandwich, she's getting that shit blown up. I want to see how evil you can be.
I'd argue this is a pretty normal response for a lot of us. It's mostly curiosity for me. How will I know if I don't try? And I think most of us have played Grand Theft Auto by now, so. And it's fine if you don't want to do these things and go that route. Most of us don't, but it's just nice to have the choice to actually roleplay as what you want to roleplay as. It didn't take long in Starfield to find out that they don't want you to be the bad guy. I didn't even notice the first time that I played that you actually take a loss on XP if you decide to go the bad guy route. It wasn't until I recently watched Jakey's video about it and explained it.
But your punishment for jail time is an XP debt. It will never lower your current level, but it will erase any current XP progress that you've made towards leveling up, and potentially even put you into the negative as well, if it's high enough.
Which it will be.
This is kind of like how jail time in Oblivion could randomly lower some of your skills. Starfield says, hey, we know we can't actually force the player to sit in a jail cell, but we want there to be some sort of consequence for it being bad. And part of me is like, damn, that's actually kind of interesting and creative, except leveling up takes a long ass time in this game. For example, to level from level 10 to level 11, it's around 900 XP, and it only gets exponentially more grindy the higher you get. So if you have a high bounty, which is not hard to get, you will be in this much debt. Have fun crawling out of that hole, you filthy little pirate bitch.
I checked out of this game pretty quick, honestly. And obviously I was too caught up in all the other core problems, I suppose, that I just didn't notice, and I wasn't expecting to do any kind of review at the time of playing this game. And needless to say, I didn't complete my bad guy playthrough because you just can't. In a lot of games like this, including some of Bethesda's own games, walking into a populated area and waving a weapon around usually causes NPCs to react in some way.
Mon pardon? Sorry, can't talk. Always wondered what the inside of the lodge looks like.
This is not the case in Starfield. It's sad because these people are what's supposed to make the world believable. A stark contrast to Baldur's Gate 3, where I just wanted to talk to everybody. I just gave up on talking to anybody in Starfield, because most of it just didn't seem like it actually mattered. I didn't feel any real connection with any of my companions. Most of the time, I just ran solo because they just complicated the situation or annoyed me. It honestly didn't feel like I was playing a role-playing game. I didn't feel like I was anybody, just a guy wandering aimlessly around space and loading screens. The open world can hardly be called an open world in my opinion. It's really sad when a company like Bethesda is known for exploration and gives us almost zero reason to explore. All the procedural generated planets are nearly the same, with the same outpost with the same NPC placement. It's almost insulting when you find it a second or a third time. Like I said in my first video about Baldur's Gate 3, I didn't take this game as seriously as I should have. I played it like any other game like Starfield, where choices just didn't really seem to matter that much. I'm sure most of us have seen Momo O'Brien's viral clip about the Goblin Camp, but I think it speaks volumes and it's really hard to sum it up any better.
I asked my viewers how they got through the Goblin Camp. For context, one of the first missions you're given is to go rescue this man Halsin in the middle of a goblin camp. Goblins are chill with drow, so when Matt and I played, we disguised ourselves as drow so we could sneak in. During my all-nighter, I gathered all the goblins by playing a little ditty, and then carefully planned out an ambush so I could attack them all at once. A lot of other people also planned out an ambush by putting grease on the stairs, ice on the bridge, using a spell that locks all the doors. Someone fully sold out the good guy location so they could assassinate the leader once they were left alone. Someone was attempting to ambush everyone, but then got caught freeing a prisoner and had to fight their way out. Someone woke up the drunk goblins and then gave them more booze so they'd pass out again. And this person poisoned the punch bowl at the party. I did not even realize that was a thing you could do. Some people threw their enemies into the spider pit. Other people befriended the spiders and caused a spider uprising. Some people tried to charm all the goblins. Other people placed a bunch of oil barrels and then blew everything up. This person was playing with their partner who got arrested and then turned into a cat to go rescue them. I also got arrested because I misclicked. Some people sided with the goblins by accident. A lot of people sided with the goblins on purpose, which means there's an alternate timeline out there where the goblins are just hanging out in the good guy zone. And in my current playthrough, I got through the goblin camp by smearing shit on my face.
I can't believe you did it! You stupid idiot! Go on, mate. Enjoy the festivities. You earned it.
And all of the goblins in the camp acknowledged that I had poo on my face.
You look like you've been kissing a wolf's backside.
Wearing me muck.
Muck on ya. Looking good, you dunger. Who suits you? And what are you doing here with that stink on your face?
That tongue on your mug's making my eyes water.
I would open up my menu, and there would be poo on my face, and flies buzzing around my head. I had a status effect for the poo on my face. And I would like to remind you that that is just one mission. That is one quest in the entire area of Act 1.
But that's why it's so easy to keep coming back to this game. You can have many playthroughs with all different outcomes or instances. Most of the time, I'm so bored with the story in most AAA games that I find myself not even bothering to read all the dialogue. And this is just not the case in Baldur's Gate 3. I found myself stopping and talking to everybody, reading every book, talking to animals and dead people if they didn't have their heads removed. I can't think of any other game before this where I have been so interested in what the people of the world have to say. The voice acting in this game is absolutely the best I've experienced in any other game, if I'm being honest. It's all so believable and immersive, where the choices have long-lasting consequences. Even the smaller decisions you make with some random NPC 100 hours previously can affect your game in the end somehow. And like I've said before, I wasn't used to this amount of freedom, and I didn't believe it all at first. It especially sank in when I was insta-killed by a wish.
Blaspheming tongue! You wish to see godhood? Wish you to
This is when it really clicked that this game wasn't messing around. I knew before there was going to be consequence with choice, but this was a really cool moment for me. This, of course, is just the tip of the iceberg. Even after hundreds of hours in this game, I'm still finding new dialogue and secrets that I didn't find the first or second time. I still have not even played the Dark Urge yet, but I think I'm taking that leap sooner than later. It's important to note that the game doesn't hold your hand for the most part, so there were times when I wandered into areas that were intended for the end of the act. But just like in Elden Ring, when the difficulty spike was too high, I just walked away and found something else to do. To some people, lack of guidance can really be tough when you're just used to chasing icons mindlessly. I totally get that. Some people don't want to think too hard when they're playing their video games, and that's fine. But for me and a lot of people, we like to be challenged. We like to read almost every book we find. I like the feeling I get when I find something out for myself. I hate that we live in the age of internet guides, because everyone is just so heavily dependent on them these days.
I'm going to show you guys a new XP farm I found in Starfield. This one is actually so insane. This one will get all your combat skills maxed out in like 10-20 minutes depending on what it is you're trying to level.
This video guide will show you how to get 100,000 runes to level up your character fast.
These make it easy to go on an all-out spending spree, can give you infinite building supplies, and also give you unlimited building size.
In this video, I'm going to talk to you about two of the best and most time-efficient ways to make tons of money in the Witcher 3 that are still working with the next-gen update.
Today I'm going to be teaching you how to cheese every single boss in Borderlands 2 to make this easy game even easier.
Alright, let's go over the new top 5 overpowered guns after the recent update here in Modern Warfare 2.
The first gun we're going to be checking out is the Bass P submachine gun. It's easily one of the best SMGs in Warzone and in multiplayer. And also guys, right here is a picture of my cat.
With Season 4, there is so many weapons. So in today's video, I'll be showing you how to get the best loadout in all of Season 4. Let's go.
As frustrating as it was as a kid to get stuck in a game, for sometimes weeks at a time, it felt extremely rewarding to figure it out for myself. Baldur's Gate 3 isn't one of those instant gratification types of games. If you give it the time it deserves, you will be rewarded. It does require strategy even with dialogue choices, but the beauty of it is, you can really have a plan unfold. If you can think of it, you can probably do it. There is always going to be a different way to handle a lot of different situations. The lack of hand-holding forces players to be creative. I wish more games would take this approach, respecting and believing in player agency. Starfield isn't the only game to take the easier approach and just assume most of us won't play a game a second or third time. But honestly, I just scummed my way through Starfield to get these types of results. It doesn't take a genius or a second playthrough to realize that Starfield is lacking depth in its dialogue choices. Not that the choices matter anyway, but some of the choices are just laughable at best. and sometimes just insulting to the player. You can tell a game like Baldur's Gate 3 was tested and made by gamers. Every choice felt like it had some kind of impact overall. And don't get me wrong, I don't expect every game to have this sort of scope, but you can just tell when a developer puts love into their games. It doesn't have to be just like Baldur's Gate 3, but it can take from it little by little. If Starfield was half of what Baldur's Gate 3 is, it would have been my second favorite game this year. I fully understand all devs can't take as big a chances like Baldur's Gate 3. I'm also not asking for that. But we can at least start out by not adding a cash shop and paid mods. I only see Starfield getting worse with time if I'm being honest. Like I always say, I'm rooting for Bethesda, but just like other companies like Blizzard and so on, they're just a hollow shell of what they used to be. Thanks for watching.